if we're going to pay money for this, we need to win. We got to send these weapons and let them use it. And Ukrainians use that to hit one of the most critical Russian military infrastructure points. And that's not only is it not mentioned in the headlines, it's barely mentioned in those stories.
Obama, Soros, Brian Lewis, little Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine.
I am reading about what the United States is doing to help the school children of Ukraine. Joseph Lindsley standing by. And Joe, we often talk about the civilian targets that Russia hits. And because they've attacked Ukrainian printing facilities, the United States is going to fund the printing of more than 3 million textbooks for Ukrainian students to use in the coming school year. And that's one of those stories you don't hear a lot about, do you?
No, and it's quite amazing, Bob. Hello from Lviv. You think about, if you look at the history for centuries of Moscow trying to control not just Ukrainians, but all different cultures and peoples in what is now the Russian Federation and what is now Eastern Europe. And there was a history, especially with the Ukrainian people, going back to the days of the Tsars in the 1700s, 1800s, banning the Ukrainian language. They did everything they could to erase it. In the same way that in the old days of the strife between the English and the Irish language was outlawed. Or even if you look at in North America, the way Native American languages were outlawed. And so Russia has been doing this consistently without really stopping for centuries. And this was you even see this when Russia occupies Ukrainian territory. The first thing they do is they get rid of everything that's in Ukrainian. They burn Ukrainian books. And that's what they did when they hit that printing press, Druk, the printing press in Kharkiv. They destroyed, tens of thousands of Ukrainian language books. And so now the fact that you have, Western nations, you have the United States paying for the perpetuation of the Ukrainian language is showing that no matter how much Moscow tries to erase this, it only makes it stronger. And I've seen that too, especially if you go to cities like Odesa or Kharkiv in particular. Those were Russian-speaking cities up until 2022. Most of the people I know there, they speak Ukrainian now, but they were speaking Russian every day up until this big invasion started. And they didn't identify as Russians, but that was the language they grew up with because of the colonial legacy. Just like people in Dublin, Ireland speak English. But now so many people have switched to Ukrainian as an act of resistance and defiance, and because they hate what Russia is doing. And so you see that the more, in many ways, the more that Ukraine and Ukrainian culture is attacked, in a way, the stronger it gets. That doesn't make it any easier. And as we look at what happened, yesterday, as we talked about what happened in the Crimean Peninsula, Crimea has been occupied by Russia since 2014. But Crimea is a unique thing. It was, even when it was fully under the control of Ukraine, it was an autonomous republic within Ukraine, because the Crimean Tatars are a different, distinct ethnic group. They have their own language. They are mainly Muslim, and they've lived there for centuries until, Russia has a history of forcing the people to leave Crimea. They did this many times throughout history, including under Stalin. And finally, after Ukraine got its independence in 1991, the Crimean Tatars were free under Ukrainian governance. You can't even call it Ukrainian governance because it's a democracy. And they were free, and people came back. They were living in exile throughout Asia, and they came back to Crimea. And now, once again, since 2014, it's been back under tyrannical Moscow control. And as we see what happened there yesterday, look at the headlines. I'll share with you 3 headlines. One from the BBC about what happened yesterday. Ukraine war, Russia blames U.S. and vows response for Crimea deaths. That's the BBC. The Guardian says, Ukraine war briefing. Moscow warns of retaliation after blaming U.S. for deadly Ukrainian attack. And then lastly, from CNN, at least 5 dead after missile fragments scatter over beachgoers in Russian-occupied Crimea. And it's very interesting, the selection of that, the word choice in that headline, because there's other things that could have been said. For example, where are the headlines about what Russia had done in the preceding 48 hours to civilians in Kharkiv, or as they've been doing, for the past 2 years? But even more to the point, Ukrainians, in that strike on Crimea yesterday, Ukrainians hit one of the most crucial Russian military communications objects. It's a long-range space communication center that controls a lot of Russian satellites. It's a very crucial, it was a huge win for Ukraine using these long-range attackings that they weren't permitted to use these American-made weapons until both Republicans and Democrats a couple months ago in Washington, they finally came to a deal. And this is when Speaker Mike Johnson actually put pressure on the White House and said, if we're going to pay money for this, we need to win. We got to send these weapons and let them use it. And Ukrainians use that to hit one of the most critical Russian military infrastructure points. And that's not only is it not mentioned in the headlines, it's barely mentioned in those stories.
Why do you think that is, Joseph?
I think, part of it is, Moscow is, they have lots of resources and money, and they push out a narrative, and it's powerful. And if you're a busy journalist, it grabs your attention. Oh, people, kids killed on a beach. That's going to get clicks. It's harder. What I just articulated to you, it took me a minute or two, right? It's harder to put that into a headline. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's part of it. I mean, it's just a basic, trying to sum up the story in a very simple way, but also because Moscow pushes it. And when I talk with Ukrainians, so often, like very earnest Ukrainians working to promote the freedom of their country, they start, responding and saying, well, Moscow, actually that was, Russian air defense that killed those kids. But once you start responding to that, you're still on their narrative track, and you're not talking about the big success story for Ukraine. And that's where Russia is very good at the propaganda. They suck you into speaking, even if you're criticizing Russia, you're still speaking on their terms and missing the big story that these weapons from America worked, and they're actually making Russia much weaker in its ability, even in this case, to launch new attacks upon Ukraine.
No, you're right. Russia is very good at that. On a positive note, we should mention the Illinois State Police. They sent body armor to Ukraine. Also, our city is supporting Ukraine by relocating Ukrainian refugees. And also ambulances have been sent from Illinois to the country. So we're with you, Joseph. Thank you. As always, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Well, which side are you on? На чьей ты стороне? Come on now. Oh, which side are you on? На чьей ты стороне?